Okay, this is part 4 or 5, one of them. Let me get the timer going. Okay, we're off to a bad start already. Okay, so where we left off, Father Retter has just been chewed out by the bishop, which I believe is the bishop. And so we end up with him palming a book of obsidian matches. These are the calling cards, the totems for the demon Blackfire, who is the villain of the story. That's putting it mildly anyway. But one of the things I wanted to say is the nature of possession. Let's talk about this a little bit. From what I understand, again, no theologian, no expert, but I also am doing a story that is going to navigate into the waters of the occult and some other things. And I've always been kind of fascinated by these stories, so bear with me. So demonic possession, to my understanding, is something very much akin to what happens with vampires. In fact, the stories of vampires that you're probably, a lot of people are much more acquainted with, I think is a model of what happens with demonic activity. There's a lot of similarities to what it is, as I understand. And one of them is that, much like a vampire, in fact, actually, where is it? There's a very good quote and something, I think. Again, this is all being done off the cuff. Yeah, here we go. The very last page, we'll talk about that as well. But down at the bottom, there's a quote from 1 Peter 5:8. Be sober and watch, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, goeth about seeking whom he may devour. And this, of course, is an important thing to keep in mind. What is a lion? A lion is an ambush predator. And very powerful, very fearful, very scary. And they tend to hunt in packs, unless you're like a male lion, in which case, but even them sometimes are attached to a pride. The thing that we have to be on guard about, at least in this example, is understand that in the spiritual realm, the way that you should understand this, and again, like for lay people, if you don't believe, you don't believe, that's fine. I'm going to try and explain things with the operation of the world that our characters are living in, and that is, we live in the mundane, the world of the flesh, right? And then we are surrounded by the spiritual realm. And what a demon is an angel who has fallen. And this will also get into the matters of the flesh being weak, which is our opening quote, and is a good primer for what's going on here. So we're surrounded by spirits. The spirits keep track of us. There's an old idea of, you'll have the good angel and the devil on your shoulder whispering to you, giving you ideas. And this is kind of a truism that you would understand. You have a guardian angel that's praying for you, looking out for you, trying to be the voice, the Jiminy Cricket, if you will, to inspire you to do the right thing in unusual circumstances or every circumstance. Meanwhile, at the same time, you have a demon, which is a fallen angel, who is constantly trying to put you in peril for the sake of your soul and your life. And, that's what life is. You navigate through all these things, and hopefully you make good choices, but we're all sinners. We're all fallen. We're all in a fallen state. And there's a lot more to be said about all of that, obviously. But for our story, so demons, like vampires, they attempt to seduce us. They seduce us and get us into points of trouble. And likewise, in the story of vampires, for instance, they cannot enter your home without your permission. And this is in a model of there has to be some acceptance for possession, full possession to take place. Oppression is where you are being attacked spiritually and you're put into a depressive state. The world seems against you. It's beating you down constantly. This is an idea of an oppressive state. People who believe that they're under a hex, this may be a case of that. But in order for you to become possessed, you have to open the doorway. You have to have an acceptance. Some agreement is made with you for that to happen to you. Possession, the question goes back, the very first thing, the nature of what all these stories is going to, sort of hinge around is this idea of why do bad things happen to good people? And this is going to be a hard thing for some people to accept, but understand that some of these things are allowed to happen to us as a kind of spiritual shock therapy. And sometimes it is for the person who undergoes it, and sometimes it's also for the sake of the souls of those who are surrounding that person in their life. And even, years later, I believe it was the late 40s, the story that inspired the movie The Exorcist was a very sad story that happened 70, 80 years ago, late 40s. My math, don't even bother with it. Almost 80 years at this point, maybe. But the fact that it happened, it has coalesced through generations now, and we have an awareness of these things. It is in the mind of people. Sometimes, as I say, shock therapy, because sometimes when everything's going right, we become very complacent in our lives. I'm just as guilty as most people, I imagine, would be. When things are going good, you don't always attribute what the goodness is to or from. And sometimes it's harder for us to accept a spiritual world when the evidence of it is not easily seen. And sometimes the horror of evil being allowed to sort of come to the fore in our mind and our thought is a way for us to then grasp and conceive the idea of the spiritual world. Even though it's from a negative place, it can reorient us to think about these things. And it's sort of like a very poor description of what's going on. That's what's happening. So again, I'm no theologian, so just use this as a lay person's trying to make sense of it. That being said, we're going to come back to this panel. And so this is a totem, if you will, or a fetish object that is an inducement, a seduction. So you have this item now that exists like in the Lord of the Rings. The Ring of Power is an incredible motif for us to understand the nature of sin and how sin can oppress us in a way. Because, for instance, Boromir is part of this party. They're going to go to defeat Sauron by destroying the ring, but it seduces him because he sees it as this holding place of power, and power that could be used as a righteous weapon in his mind, but that's a seduction because it will grab hold of him and tear him apart inside. As you see, it's his small contact with the seduction of the ring breaks up the party, splits up the party, puts everything into disunity, and he himself realizes too late the effect that it had taken upon him. He dies nobly, he confesses, which is a real interesting thing to look at as well. But you can see the power and the seduction of these things, even like these fetish objects, these totems. The ring is a totem and a fetish object. It is not in and of itself the power, but it is a place where power is accessed. And likewise, looking at Frodo, was a very chaste and innocent person whom the ring had the least amount of effect on, but by the end of the story, he's completely in its possession. And I think the moment that we're seeing here is not unlike Bilbo Baggins, who got a hold of the ring, whom the ring wanted to be found by anyone who would get it to its ends, which is the destruction of all things, and to be the centerpiece of power for the devil, if you will. But it grabbed hold of him and seduced him by its usage. And even though he and Gandalf, Bilbo and Gandalf, had decided that he would give away the ring to Frodo, notice that the ring keeps on finding itself in Bilbo's possession. It had become this thing that he could not let go of. This is the demonic power of a small possession, which starts off by infatuation, and it's a danger point. So when we see Father Retter here palming this, I am reminded of Bilbo Baggins and the ring, that it already in some way is working as is seducing him, is working as seduction. And this is an incredibly dangerous moment. And I think it's framed in a good way. I wish that these stakes would sort of, and maybe, I'm not giving the audience enough credit, but Doug, I would just say that one of the things is I would be worried that I wish it was called out a little more attention. This is the ticking time bomb, if you will. If you're showing us the dynamite with the timer and it's counting down, I think the audience understands the risk and the pace of which is about to happen. And this is the ultimate ticking time bomb. But I just wish that a little more attention was brought to it. And I've mentioned this before, and I'm going to do another aside. Again, we're stuck on the one page. This is what you're going to get from me. Go see other people if you want the short synopsis. But this book is dealing with subject matter that I find fascinating, and hopefully you will too. And I'm not giving this short shrift in any sense.